Hey everybody, welcome to Q Plus EDU. My name is Frederick. My pronouns are they, them. I am Out Youth's Texas Gender and Sexuality Alliance Network Coordinator, and I am super thrilled to be here with y'all for our panel on raising transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming children. I'm going to pass it over to E. Smith, who will be moderating today. And we are recording the session. It will be made available afterwards, but only the participants, only the panelists will be recorded, so you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. So thanks so much for joining us. We're super excited to have you.
Hi, y'all. I'm E. I use they, them pronouns. I am the founder and president of the Central Texas GSA Coalition, as well as the founder of Q Plus EDU, which is why you're all here today. And so I'm super excited to be moderating this discussion. We have some amazing panelists here, and I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist, Beth, to introduce themselves.
Hi, everybody. I am Beth. My pronouns are they and them. I am located in Kentucky. And I'm trying to think, I took some notes on things to intro. I am a trans non-binary person and a parent of a 6-month-old baby. I'm a white person. I am a fat person with some size privilege. I'm college educated. I grew up in the rural South and still kind of live in the rural South. Kentucky is one of those debatable areas that's maybe trying to be northern, but is pretty southern. I've had access to education and healthcare, and mostly financial stability throughout my life. I'm married to a person named Astrid. They're a trans feminine person, and our baby's name is Omega, and we use they, them pronouns for Omega. They're 6 months old, and yeah, I'm excited to talk with other folks about parenting and be here on the panel with you all. I'll pass it to Jo, I think.
Okay. So my name's Jo Ivester, and my pronouns are she, hers. I am 63 years old as of this week, so it's a birthday celebration. I'm the mom of 4 young adults ranging in age from 25 to 35. My 30-year-old is transgender, and he came out in his mid-20s, and before then, he was trying to figure things out. So I didn't know when he was a child, so I'm in kind of a different situation than some of you folks that are here listening who have kids. Privileges, marginalizations that we've been asked to include as we're talking, I've had a very easy time of it. I was raised in a politically active family. As a child, I lived for a while in an all-Black town in the cotton fields of Mississippi in the 1960s. It gave me, as a child, an awareness of the civil rights movement and awareness of what it was like to be different. It gave me a lot of courage, and so it was easier for me later on when my son told me he's trans to go ahead and figure out what I needed to do to be an advocate and an ally. I've been married for almost 40 years, and I've had the luxury of a solid education, and I've never had to worry about putting food on the table. And I realized that this puts me in there's a lot of privilege there, and I want to acknowledge that and recognize that not everybody listening tonight and being a part of this evening has that privilege. So, Rachel.
Thanks, Jo. My name is Rachel Gonzalez. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a mother of 3. I'm a program manager for Reimagine Gender. And my 10-year-old is trans femme, and she transitioned when she was 5. I have a presumably cis 7-year-old daughter and a presumably cis 5-year-old son. And my husband identifies as Chicano, and while I am very white and very privileged in my education and upbringing and access to resources, My grandmother's Mexican, and I was acculturated in a very Mexican style. Probably not the right word to use, but I am the Spanish speaker between my husband and I, and he is a person of color. And my daughter super identifies as Latina herself. All my kids do, but she is heavily identified as trans Latina. And I live in Dallas, Texas, and I'm 37.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. So now we're going to dive right into the good, juicy questions. So the first one I have is just, when did your child come out? And then I'm going to combine that with the second question. If there were challenges or some learning curves that you had to navigate following your child's coming out, what did that look like? And how did you sort of overcome those challenges? So I'm going to start with Jo on this one.
Okay, so my son Jeremy, basically when he was born, we thought we had a daughter, and we were wrong. As he was growing up, we called him a tomboy. That's what he called himself. And it was really very easy as he was going through childhood, because we had no problem just having him present the way he wanted to present, play the games he wanted to play, be with the friends he wanted to be with. And it wasn't until toward the end of elementary school that things started getting difficult, and the boys that he hung out with started viewing him as being different, because they saw him as a girl, and they rejected him from their circle. And so he was very alone. And we had no idea really what was going on. We were just kind of waiting for him to get to middle school and start dating, and we didn't know what was happening. I would say the biggest challenge and regret is that because we didn't know, we weren't able to give him the kind of support that he deserved. And so that's part of why today we want to reach out and let families know of our experience, so that our youth can get the kind of support they need. Going through high school, Jeremy was often by himself. And then toward the end of high school, he started getting some awareness of a transgender community, and was a little bit not believing. We didn't have the language to talk about it. He put it on a back burner. He says he was really good at denial. And the first thing that he addressed was physical dysphoria, where he felt like his breasts just didn't belong. And he decided to have surgery and save for it in his mid-20s. Before ever saying he was trans, he had surgery, top surgery. And then a year later was when he said, I'm trans. And he said, my name's Jeremy, use male pronouns, I'm gonna go on hormones. And all that happened when he was 24. By 25, he had changed his legal identification, and he has flourished. He is 30 years old now and just doing great. And he says, hey, I'm just Jeremy the guy. I don't need to be Jeremy the trans guy, but I will forego my privacy and just being Jeremy the guy in order to be an advocate, because as a family, we're willing to talk about it, and so we have to talk about it. So I think I answered all of your questions with that.
Yeah, thank you so much. And then Rachel, if you want to tell your story and sort of address the same.
You remind me what I'm addressing.
Absolutely. Yeah, so just when your child came out, how old were they? And then what were some of the challenges or learning curves you faced, if there were any? If it was a super easy breeze and you were able to navigate it,
It was so easy, and I knew all about it, and it was great. So my daughter was 5 when she socially transitioned. I think my biggest regret is not supporting her in transitioning sooner. I was really hesitant. I didn't have the support of my husband or my parents, and those were the people that were closest to us. And I was raised in a super Catholic household, and while I was not a practicing Catholic at the time, and I'm definitely not now, I had been acculturated in a way that's super problematic, and that's like, well, you don't, create rifts with family. Yes, you have a crazy family member. Yes, you're like, you just don't bring those things up. And that's not an option when you have a trans kid. You're not going to, I wasn't going to bring my kid around family members if it was going to create an issue for her. Kind of going off on a tangent. But so Libby was really in a moment where I wasn't sure if she was non-binary. And I didn't really have the words or the ability to express it, but I didn't want to force her into a box, and I didn't want to set her up to have to identify as female. And what ended up happening is that it went on for so long that she became so desperate that she was just had to transition. And I won't forget those moments when she just had it with family members giving gifts to my younger daughter that were gifts that really she wanted. And my younger daughter has really, gifts are not her love language, but my oldest daughter definitely is. So it was salt in the wound. Sorry, I have some big dogs that are very far away from me, but you can still hear them probably. She just hit a point where she was like, I need Santa to turn me into a girl. And it was right after Christmas. I'm like, well, we don't have to wait till next year. And I just took her shopping and got her girls' clothes. And she had this very methodical process she needed to go through to go into the dressing room, to do all the things that I don't do. I am not the person that's like, oh, we're going on a shopping trip. It was still really hard for my parents. My dad ended up reading a book called Becoming Nicole, and then he was like, okay, so the next step is hormone replacement therapy. And I was like, nope, nope, super not. She's 5. At that point, she hadn't even changed her name or pronouns yet. And so, there was a lot of ironing out some of that confusion, but it took hitting a wall with my mom. My parents were married at the time. My dad has since passed away, but I hit a wall with my mom where I was just, I couldn't talk to her because it was an argument every single time. It was, oh, it's because you're letting her watch Frozen. Oh, it's because, all these different reasons, which my husband was also on that train, which he has since become extremely supportive. Once Libby hit that wall and needed to transition, he was like, whoa, okay, this is real and we're doing this. But even though we live in Dallas and in Texas, we have a really amazing community of friends and school networks that it was a non-issue. And the director of her school was like, I don't know if I've ever had a transgender student in a preschool, but there's no doubt in my mind that she's a girl. And so they supported her, and all of her friends were like, why are you telling me she's wearing dresses? Of course she's wearing dresses. Why wouldn't she be wearing dresses? That's what she likes. And so we've had a really supportive community, and the people that we have chosen to surround ourselves with have been nothing but amazing and supporting our whole family through the process. So kind of bounced around a little bit with that story, but those are the initial things.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. That's really great hearing sort of both of those perspectives and experiences and the ways that, life sort of came at you and was different for, both of you raising your trans kids. And my next question is just sort of what have the ongoing conversations looked like? Because I think a lot of times, we talk about the coming out process and it's, oh yeah, my child told me that she's trans and she wants to be a girl and she's wearing girl clothes now. But that's not it. Like it's a process. And so I'd be curious to hear first from Jo, how those conversations looked. You know, was it family dinner table discussions like, hey, I have this event and I want to go buy a suit, or, you know, just sort of what those conversations looked like?
It's a great question. It was nonstop. That just, as we said, life was happening, and so we were always, our family's been very close all along, and so questions. I mean, you mentioned going out and buying a suit. Well, that was just part of the conversation, and in the same way, any of our kids might have said, "Oh, I went to the store today and got a new shirt," Jeremy would say the same thing. So it wasn't as if it was always, "Oh, let's talk about being transgender right now." It was just a family's communication. And earlier on, when we were starting to figure things out, it was very much my husband John and me following Jeremy. So we were taking his lead because, or following his lead, I should say, because he was already first into his teen years as he was exploring, and then into his early 20s. And so he could tell us, here's what we need to talk about. And then the conversations just ranged very, very openly. I mean, he was willing to share stuff with us that I never shared with my mom or dad. And that's really cool. I would say the best part about the journey in many ways has been those family conversations, and not just parent with Jeremy, but siblings. So Jeremy has an older sister, an older brother, and a younger brother. So Jeremy's the number 3. And basically, they've all been talking about it, partly because Jeremy gave me permission to write a book. I'm a writer when I'm not out being a speaker. And I wanted to write a book about Jeremy. I asked his permission. I asked him to be a part of it, and he agreed. And the writing process really made it so the family had to talk through what are all the anecdotes that we're including in the book, and what happens when older sister remembers it one way and Jeremy remembers it a different way, as an example. And those are some of the most powerful conversations, was when memories were different. So the communication and talking about it has been really exciting and has pulled us all much closer together, I would say.
Awesome. It's really great. And yeah, Rachel, if you want to answer the same, sort of what the conversations with your daughter have looked like.
Well, it's been very different from Jo's experience since she was so young. And, you know, my youngest was a baby when Libby transitioned. So we actually, so my husband and I are both like extroverted extroverts. We're the people that have like lots of friends, and we both have really large families. And so I spent a long time drafting an email that I could just send out to everyone, because it was going to be not only too time consuming, but too emotionally exhausting to have to explain my kid's existence to every single person. So I drafted an email and put in, I tried really hard to make it as firm and non-negotiable, but also empathetic in a, like, I know this is new and you probably don't understand this, so here's some resources. And, you know, all the responses that we got were really positive, which was amazing. We also got a lot of crickets, and, you know, those opinions have been made known over the last years, but we left the door open for conversation. And I would say we have had some really amazing relationships develop out of this, well, on so many levels. But I've had, I think, one of the most amazing things for me to come out of all this is the massive chosen family that we now have, and the awesome, incredible trans adults that have made themselves available for me to be able to have these conversations. And I'm gonna start crying because I always start crying. But just having people that are willing to talk through things with Libby, to talk through them with me, so that we know what's coming when she's an adult, that she knows she has lots of questions as she's entering puberty. And having such deep and authentic relationships with people where we can have these open dialogues is invaluable, and something that I didn't realize was as much of a void in my life as it was, that it's really helped define who is real in our lives, for lack of better words, knowing who's really here for it, so to speak. So yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much for that perspective. And I think for a lot of, trans people and queer people and all of the communities that surround us, finding that chosen family really is one of the most important things. So it's really great to hear you voice that. And so now we're going to shift a little bit, and I have a question for Beth about sort of what the response has been like to your raising Omega outside of the binary within your communities and your family. Have other parents and adults been supportive, or are they confused? What does that look like?
Yeah, so it's kind of split, I would say, into 3 groups. So that there's like strangers that we just interact with, or people that are kind of in our further out social circles, and then family, and then our kind of chosen family and closer community. And within that kind of closer community, I have big dogs too, Rachel, so you're not alone. Within that kind of like chosen family, people have been so supportive. And it was kind of it's become a more concrete decision over time. But when my spouse and I first started talking about, are we going to assign a gender to this baby or not, it really just felt like a door we kind of needed to leave open. And I do think it's a door we needed to leave open for our kid, but I also think we needed to leave it open for ourselves. Because when I first got pregnant, I was out as non-binary, but not much else. I was using she, her pronouns, and just like had a lot of kind of exploring left to do. My spouse was still using masculine pronouns. They were going by a different name. And kind of through pregnancy and now 6 months into Omega's life, we've really kind of come out more and more. My spouse has started hormones. And we've been able to have these conversations with our families in large part because we weren't gendering Omega. So I think it was like, we just need to kind of leave things open for a little bit and let things kind of settle, and let all 3 of us kind of figure out who we are. So with our families of origin, it's been a little trickier. I think it can, gender conversations, like Rachel was saying, I think have the potential to bring us so close and let us really feel like we know the people around us. But it can also feel sort of threatening, I think, and be kind of challenging, especially to come out to your parents. Like, that is a scary thing, to come out to these people who gave birth to you and who were the first people to know you. That can be tough. So we've had kind of mixed results there. Our families are more or less supportive. They feel kind of confused by it too at times, I think, and it's sort of tough for them. And then out in the world, the conversations are usually either support or confusion. So we have not had any like negative reactions from folks out in the world. Often people are just like, I think they just hear the word gender, like they ask, is it a boy or a girl? And then they just hear, oh, we didn't assign a gender, and just like not getting an answer to their question and hearing the word gender is like, that's scary and confusing. I'm gonna just look at this cute baby and move on. So yeah, it's a real mix.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And my next question is just about what resources and information you sought out on your own to better support your kids as they were going through that process. And I'm curious, Beth, if you have sort of done, I guess, research on your own. I think a lot of the conversations that I've heard around raising children outside of the binary, people are worried about medical care, or what are you going to do when they enroll in schools or whatever. So I'm curious, one, if you have perspective to offer on that. If not, totally okay. And then also from Jo and Rachel, what things you found helpful, if there were books you read, websites, community groups, whatever. But we'll start with Beth on this one.
Cool. So there is a Facebook community, and I had a few friends sort of ask me, like, are you going to assign a gender to this baby or not? Pretty early in pregnancy. So I already had like individuals in my life talking about that. And then there's a Facebook group called Raising Babies where folks talk about this. There's a book coming out in September, I think, called Raising Them by Kyle Myers. It's really good. they've done a great job on that. And then just other books around gender, and I think just having language about gender and learning from other trans folks and reflecting on my own experience. Those are usually the places I go when I'm needing some support or resources.
Awesome, thanks. I'm pulling links for that so I can drop them in the chat. But Jo, if you want to go ahead and talk about your resource journey, sort of.
Sure. Well, I turned to Rachel. So, I mean, I say that kind of funny now, but I turned to people who had trans children or were trans themselves, and the way I would meet them was through advocacy groups. So we as a family went very quickly from realizing who Jeremy is to saying we need to be out there as advocates. And it coincided, I'm in Austin, Texas, it coincided with some really nasty stuff going on at the state capitol. And so we went to the hearings with things like the bathroom bill, and we would listen to the speeches, and we did some lobbying ourselves. And the speeches were folks like Rachel, specifically Rachel, and they would get up and talk about what was going on in their lives. So that was tremendously helpful. I also, at the time, was really just thrilled with the way Equality Texas had come forward and was really organizing a lot of the communication, and specifically the communication from parents of trans children. And so I sought out that organization. I looked to whatever websites Jeremy told me to look at, and that was how I really started seeing that medically, this is very real. This is not something that Jeremy's just kind of coming up with and out of nowhere. This is 100% a real thing, as Jeremy put it. And I was able to go to the American Psychiatric Association's documentation and their write-up and look at, well, what is medically recommended to deal with gender dysphoria. And I could see that what Jeremy was proposing in the way of surgery was exactly what the medical community was recommending. And that gave me a lot of help. The book Becoming Nicole, that Rachel, I think Rachel, you mentioned that. I found that helpful. Lori Frankel had a novel. She was an award-winning journalist, I guess, and wrote a book that is loosely based on her own child, and called That's the Way It Always Was. And so I just started reading everything I could. So that was really helpful to me. But I would say mostly the people.
Definitely people for me too. As I already mentioned, extroverted extrovert here. I'm the personality that's like, okay, I got to find all the experts and talk to them. So my background is actually in cultural applied anthropology, my bachelor's and my master's. And so I had already had a fair amount of education on gender outside the binary in other countries and indigenous cultures. And but my own experience had been, I lived in Tijuana for a little while, and I had met some of the sex workers there, and it was, they were amazing, but it was a very like, this is a really hard life kind of experience. And that was the only experience that I had face to face with trans people knowingly. And so I got on groups, and I'm still really good friends with Vanessa Ford, who is a mom who was in the DC area. And I had no idea that there were other parents in my area. And there's a huge network now, thanks to the bathroom bill battle, of parents that have come forward and really built an amazing community. But, you know, I think similarly to Libby's kind of aha moment when she realized that she wasn't the only person that is trans in the world, just getting to know other parents and seeing that they have the same experiences and kind of unpacking all of the binary things that are imposed on us together has been a really powerful experience for me, because I don't have to tell anyone that's non-binary, but it's when you do identify in the binary as a cis person, there's just so much ingrained in every single thing that you do that you don't recognize. And so I'm just such a better person having been able to talk to different people, because really that's been my biggest thing, and be able to have other parents that we can talk through these things with, instead of having to impose these burdens on trans people. Because even though I mention awesome chosen family, I try my best not to overburden them with questions. And certainly when I'm unpacking my own things, I've also, well, Jo mentioned, the advocacy really skyrocketed the networking when Texas lost its mind, has lost its mind so many times over. But in 2017, it was such a disastrous situation. And yeah, they had another thing coming, obviously, if they thought they were going to come after our kids. And it was a really, really powerful environment to be in, which is where I first met Jo. And we just caravanned tons of parents together, and we all got to know each other in the most raw states, where we are sitting in rooms listening to just hate speech one after the other. And that's a pretty bonding, powerful moment to say, we're going to set all of our differences aside, because we got to band together to make sure the state's not going to hurt our kids. So all that to say, people.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that's really interesting that you bring that up. Being able to find that really close community within advocacy work, even when the situation that you meet in isn't ideal. No one wants to meet their closest group of friends at a Senate committee hearing about a bill that would ban trans people from using bathrooms. But I think that is the experience for a lot of marginalized folks, sort of looking for those groups. I know for me personally, I also found that sort of close community through activism and advocacy work. And so that's just a really interesting perspective you bring. Thank you for that. My next question is just more generally, what needs and desires did your child express to you during their transition, and how did you meet those? So Jo, I know you said that Jeremy got top surgery even before he came out. And Rachel, you talked about buying clothes for Libby. And so sort of just thinking about the specific concrete needs that your kids brought up, how did you navigate meeting those? And also, were there needs that you didn't feel comfortable meeting or were unable to meet, and how did that process sort of play out? So once again, we'll start with Jo.
Okay. I want to share just like a couple of brief anecdotes to illustrate. I'm a storyteller, so tell me if I'm doing too much detail. But before Jeremy could even ask us what to do, what we could do for him, we were getting signals without realizing it. So when he was a preschooler still, we were in a situation where I had taken him in to get a haircut, and the stylist hadn't done a good job. And his hair had been like about shoulder length, and we were just neatening it up, and it didn't work. And so I told him, don't worry about it, I'll fix it when we get home. And when we did get home, I started cutting his hair. And we're sitting in the bathroom. I pulled my desk chair in there, and he's looking in the mirror. I'm looking in the mirror behind him. And the shorter I cut his hair, the bigger this grin was coming out. And I just kept going. Partly because I'd cut one side and then the other side would be too long, and I'd cut that side. So I was inexperienced with the styling scissors. But also I think I was just intuitively picking up Jeremy's unstated need to have his hair look really short and boyish. And I just responded to it, and I could feel his joy. And that was exciting. And that sort of thing kept happening through his childhood, where it wasn't that he said anything, it was just who he was and who he still is. He liked a flannel shirt that I wore, that probably now he would say is out of style and would tease me about. But at the time, it was a very boyish flannel shirt, and he wanted to get one, and the only place we could find one was in the boys department. This was when he was like 9 or 10 years old. And I was saying, hey, you know, this is fine. This is where the shirt is that you want. There's nothing wrong with shopping in the boys section. And so that's what we did. And I didn't know I was fulfilling this need that he had. I just did it because it felt right. I felt like I wanted to keep my kid feeling joyful, and that was how I did it. I could keep going with anecdotes, but I don't I don't want to take too much of everybody's time on that. But yeah.
Before Libby transitioned, it similar to what Jo has expressed, but there's such a double standard with it's so much more stigmatized to shop with a boy in the girls section. And even though I was very like, screw anyone who thinks anything of it, my husband was very, very conscious of it. And we had a moment, I've told this story in other instances, but when Libby was 3, before she turned 4, I told her that she could pick out anything from the Legoland store on our way out. I wasn't going to buy anything else, but because I was very like, we're not buying stuff made in China, because she couldn't read. And so she, you know, all the other things, nope. But anything from the Lego store, because in my mind, the Lego store was Legos. And so we went to the Lego store on our way out, and she's, you know, we're looking in the boy section, and she's just like, no. And she loved animals. So I was like, oh, this animal set's really cool. What about this? And she was like, I guess, yeah. And she turns around and there's a fairy costume with the Lego logo in between the wings, and like pink with green trim, wings, the wands. I think I had some other stuff, but this is what I want. You said I could pick out whatever I wanted from this. And I was like, well, all right, I said it. But you still have to get Legos. So we walked out, and we were not out the door before she was ripping it open, putting it on. And my husband was just like, are you kidding me? And I'm like, no, she's going to wear it. And she wore that all the time at home for the 2 years before she transitioned, less than, but it was such an intense, like she had to have that thing that she could put on at home. And I think that's what got her through, I guess, until she had to transition. But you know, she's so young. I don't know that I would say, aside from waiting too long, I don't know that there's anything that I wasn't able to provide or haven't been able to provide. We're very fortunate to be able to get her access to whatever she needs. And I, you know, I always make the joke that I'm a Taurus, so I'm super, super stubborn. And if I'm going to have to be the one that's going to pave the way, then that's what we're going to have to do. And, so, you know, I think she's starting to realize how much privilege she has, having access to all of these things, but she's just a normal kid.
And I think you're so on target with saying that in our society, it is definitely easier on a trans boy than a trans girl, that our society says tomboy as if that's a really good accepted thing. And I was a tomboy, and so many of my friends were. And now I even question the terminology of that, because there isn't something comparable for trans girls. And just, it's not right, and it's not fair. And it makes me even more aware, hearing you speak about the privilege that my family has had with how easy it has been in some ways. I would say the toughest thing with Jeremy was when he was about 10 or 11, he used to go for sleepovers with all his little guy friends. And one day when they were planning it, I got a phone call from the mom saying I'd have to pick Jeremy up at 11 o'clock before all the boys, as she put it, went to sleep, because it wasn't okay for Jeremy, except she used his old name, to sleep with the boys. And so then I had to deal with telling my 8 or 9-year-old kid that he had just been excluded from that entire social life, and there was nothing I could do about it. So that was one of the most painful parenting moments, because I knew it was so disappointing for my kid, and I knew there was nothing I could do about it.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing. And I think that really does point to just sort of the prevalence of patriarchy and misogyny in our society, and the fact that, you know, I feel like people who are socialized as girls definitely have more freedom to explore gender and presentation. And boys who try to do that will be ostracized. And, you know, like, yeah, I think it is a lot different for people who are raised as boys to try to explore gender and explore femininity and have sort of these experiences. So that's a really interesting perspective. Rachel, when you were talking, my mind sort of went on this tangent about the fairy wings, and I have a question for Beth. As you've sort of, you know, been in the raising a baby process with Omega, what has it been like sort of trying to find non-gendered things? Because I feel like anytime I go into a baby section in a store, there's like a line down the middle and it's pink and blue. And so I'm just curious if there's been any difficulty navigating that, if it's just been annoying, or what that's looked like.
Yeah, so our approach has kind of been that nothing really has a gender. And I think Omega is actually outside the door, so I might let them in and then I'll keep talking. Y'all can come in, babe. They may come in a moment. But just that nothing really has a gender. So we do kind of assign gender to clothes and to toys and all of those things, but they don't inherently have a gender. Y'all can come in. Or do they need to? They don't. Do you want to say hi? So this is Omega, and this is my spouse, Astrid. I was about to talk about him. So parenting. Okay. Parenting with a trans feminine person has like really pointed out that misogyny to me, and that thing that people who are raised as boys, like it is, people are so scared about what it would look like for them to wear fairy wings and dresses and pink. And it's so heartbreaking to not get to do that when it's what you need to express your gender. So even though as a person who was like put in pink things when I didn't want to be, and I'm like, do we have to do the pink frills? We try to just do all of it so that Omega can have that full experience and then know what it feels like to wear fairy wings or play with Legos or wear whatever clothes, and then they can decide as they get older kind of what they want to continue and what they want to leave behind.
They're beautiful.
Thank you. Gonna say hi?
So that, can I share one more thing that triggered for me? Like you mentioned, that like nothing is inherently girls or boys, and we had an experience for Libby's. So Libby went through this, like, you know, this arc of needing to be super high femme with all the sparkles and, you know, identifying herself as femme, and is now in this like, maybe I'm just gonna wear like a bow tie. And I'm like, all right, cool. So she wanted a makeover birthday party for her 7th birthday, which, okay, like that was super important to her. She had to have a makeup station, a hair station, a nail station, and karaoke. And she didn't want to have a birthday party unless it had all of those things. And we had a friend who refused to let her daughter come because she did not want her daughter to think that those things were important. And I was just like, I realize what you're saying, but at the same time, like, this is important to her, and we're not saying that should be important to everyone. And are we not just then backing up patriarchy and misogyny by saying that these things are bad instead of just saying it's okay to be high femme if you want to be. So anyway, just jogged my memory on that. That was a big, like, confusing moment for all of us.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's something that is a shared experience among a lot of trans and non-binary people. I know as I was figuring out my gender, I definitely went through a phase of like super masculine all the time. No dresses, no pink, no frills. Like, it was a time. And that wasn't necessarily authentic, but it's what I felt like I had to do to be perceived as valid. And so I think thinking about the ways in which we gender these concepts, and then that we also put trans people and non-binary people into these boxes that are more restrictive than the boxes that we put cis people into, is just really interesting. And thinking about that from a parenting perspective is also was really great. So thank you for that. And I want to note that we are about halfway through our time, and I want to invite all of our attendees to ask any questions that they might have, either in the chat or the Q&A. We'd love to hear from you if you have, things that you're interested in learning about. I feel like we've addressed a lot of our prepared questions as we've talked through things. One that I do have is, how did you support your child through any trauma that might have occurred, through their childhood? So Jo, you talked about that sleepover experience and how that was difficult. But I'm curious if you have any other experiences and advice to offer other parents about ways that you sort of made sure that your child felt supportive when the external world wasn't as good to them as their families have been. So Jo, if you have more to offer on that.
So I would say the anecdote I've shared was probably the time where I felt I let my kid down the most, and felt the most helpless. As in retrospect though, looking back on the sum of all of it, it's that I didn't have the vocabulary or the understanding to be able to say to him, hey, here's some information about gender identification and gender identity, and you're getting this in school as part of your education program, that you're getting exposed to all this. And then it wouldn't have been this big deal that waited until he was in his 20s. And that's what I want to get to as a society, because I really regret that we went through all those years. And the only language I had was sexual orientation. And so it occurred to me that there was something different about Jeremy than what I'd expected. And so when he was around 13 or 14, I asked if he thought he might be gay. And he just said flat out, no, that's not, why would you think that? And it wasn't until his siblings said, well, in response to him saying, you won't believe what mom said to me, they said, well, what did you answer? And he was like, well, no. And he was stunned that they even thought that was a question as to how he would answer. And that's really the start of him realizing he was coming across different from the way his high school buddies came across. And I did what I could with asking that question, but I was clueless, and no kid should have a clueless parent. And so that is, to me, the most traumatic thing is that all through those years, Jeremy didn't have a parent actively supporting him in that. He knew he was loved. There was no question about that. And he knew he was liked, and he knew he had the freedom to do whatever he wanted, but he had no role model. He had no information. So that has to change as a society. That absolutely has to change. Rachel?
Can you remind me what the question is, please?
Definitely. Yeah, so if there was any sort of like trauma or difficulty, bullying, anything like that, that you know of that your child had to experience, sort of how did you navigate that and ensure that they felt healthy and supported and safe, even when the external world wasn't always kind to them?
So Libby's been really, she'll tell you she's been bullied. She had an old classmate say that she was a boy that was wearing a dress one time. It was a one-time incident. I talked to the kid's parents. It was all fine. It was an unintentional bully situation. So Libby still has a lot of anxiety, a lot. And so I have really, especially talking to other parents with kids slightly older than mine, knowing what is, kind of in the pipeline for puberty with anxiety and things. I've done a lot of work with Libby on mindfulness and meditation and trying out different natural supplements. And it's been a lot of, again, unpacking all of my own stuff from my childhood, because as Jo mentioned, we talk about a lot of things with our kids that we didn't talk about with our parents. And I wasn't raised in a household where we talked about the things that Libby and I talk about. And it's so critically important for her to be able to talk to me about anything. And especially as she's in this, entering puberty phase. So we've done, I've done a lot of figuring out how to talk to her about all these different things and setting really firm and known boundaries with her, with our other kids, and everyone else, that no one is allowed in our house that isn't 100% respectful of our family, of everyone in our family, because our home is our sanctuary. And while we can't control the things that happen outside of our house, we can control what happens inside of our house. And this will always be a safe space. So, it's been a lot of digging deep on all of my own stuff to figure out what is going to work best to make all of my kids feel safe.
Looking forward to when Libby's older, or anybody who's got kids that are going to eventually want surgery. Not that everybody does. I would say one of the traumatic things for Jeremy was also one of the most joyful things, which was the actual decision to have surgery and then doing it. He flew to Florida, and I flew from Texas to Florida, and we met up at the airport and then stayed in a hotel room together for a week. And on the second day there, he had his surgery, and then I'm the one who took care of him physically for the week, which was an incredible week of bonding that I probably remember better than he did, because he was recovering from surgery. But the support I want to talk about is what I saw in the waiting room for the first appointment, the pre-surgery, the day before. And I looked around the waiting room and I saw all these young adults who were there for exactly the same surgery. This doctor was known, this was exclusively what he did. And with, I think, just one exception, they were all there either on their own or with a friend their own age, and there weren't parents there. And that, to me, was a really heartbreaking realization that these young adults were going through something as traumatic as surgery and everything that goes with that, because it's the surgery is the physical, but there's all the emotional and just everything that was there. And these 20-year-olds and 23-year-olds and 25-year-olds were there essentially on their own with no parental support. And that's something, again, that I hope to change.
Yeah, that is sad that, so many children and young adults, have to navigate the journey of life and also of being trans and things alone because they don't have that family support. And I think as a society, we're working to get better, but it really is unfortunate that things aren't better already. But that story does bring me to one of my other questions, which is just, I want to hear about one of the best moments that you've experienced with your child that you're comfortable sharing. So it could be related to their transition or it could not. But yeah, so far in that process. So Beth, if you have something to share also, I would love to hear it. If you want to start or.
Sure. For me, I think there definitely have been awesome moments, but really a special thing is like looking forward, and just knowing that we won't have a lot of these traumas. You know, there will be traumas because everybody experiences that, but these things that I've experienced, that my spouse has experienced, that Jeremy and Libby have experienced, like Omega won't have to do that. You know, they'll just get to say, hey, these pronouns are feeling good for me right now, or hey, I'd like to think about this surgery, like what would that look like for me to do, or hey, I need some hormones, or I need different clothes. And that's really exciting and really healing for me too, because it makes it feel a little less scary. I think it makes me feel brave in my own coming out with my own parents and with other people as well.
So thank you. Yeah, Jo, if you'd like to share.
So the example or story I want to share actually goes back to that same week in Florida when Jeremy was recovering from surgery. So he did a kind of different order from most people who have gone on testosterone and changed their name and presentation of themselves, their pronouns, before doing the surgery. He did the surgery first. And he was adamant that he was not having gender reassignment surgery, that he was strictly addressing gender dysphoria to remove his breasts, give himself a more masculine chest, but that didn't mean he was transgender. So he was still in this pretty intense denial. But in the midst of all of that, he said to me, Mom, I'm not planning on doing anything more, but if I did, and I changed my name, I don't want to take a name that is a popular baby name today. What would you have named me if I had been born as a boy? Was the way he worded it. And I said, well, that's easy. You would have been Sammy, but you can't take that because it's already taken. So Jeremy has a younger brother, Sammy, and we had two names picked out and he didn't get Sammy. So he said, well, what would fit in with the rest of the family? And so for the whole week that we were there and we're passing time, we're kicking around names. And parents don't get to name their kids twice normally, but I got to be involved in this incredible conversation with Jeremy talking about names that we both liked, what names did I like that he didn't, vice versa. And he didn't tell me that he picked the name Jeremy. It kind of was just one of the names. And as part of the conversation, he just said, yeah, I don't know, it's probably not going to happen. It wasn't until almost a year later that he said that he was about to announce to his circle of friends through Facebook that his new name is Jeremy. And it never occurred to him to first say to me, oh, I'm going to go with the name you picked. But he did, which was really cool because it reflected on our closeness. Well, at the time I asked him, I said, a neat middle name to go with Jeremy Ivister would be Andrew, Jeremy Andrew Ivister. Anne is my middle name and it's my grandmother's name. And I thought it would be neat to have the family name. And he just kind of shrugged. He has this smile that could mean I like the idea and it could mean I'm putting up with you talking. And I had no idea what he meant. And then he forgot that he hadn't told me. And the day we stood, or I should say he stood in court to get his name changed legally, the judge said, how do you want to be known from this day forward? And Jeremy said, Jeremy Andrew Ivister. And that was the first time I knew what his middle name was. And he had chosen to just be connected with me in that way. So kind of cool. I got to pick my kid's name twice.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's a really great story. Rachel, if you have an experience you'd like to share.
let's see. But let's see. When Libby was about to transition, I had gotten her the book I Am Jazz, and I will never forget her face the first time she read that book and had that, like, there's another person like me. And it was the happiest I had seen her in years, and such a weight taken off of her shoulder that I didn't understand was there. It was such a happy moment, I think, for both of us. But man, we've had so many really amazing moments. But last fall, we were in the middle of supporting our really good friends who have gone. One of Libby's close friends' father has taken a very public, taken their custody battle very, very public in a very ugly way. And so we were in the middle of supporting them. We had their dogs at our house because media was all over their house. They couldn't go home. It was a nightmare. And Libby went to school and had art class that day and came home with a little magnet that she made for me that said brave, and she had drawn all around it, and she was like, I made this for you because you're the bravest person I know. And I was just like crying. But it was she comes out in these moments of just like, she is deeply unaware of her privilege, but at the same time, she has these moments of being so deeply grateful for the life that she has. And it's been a really amazing journey for all of us. And I'm definitely a much better person because of it.
Thank you so much. Those are all such beautiful experiences. And yeah, I'm glad you were able to live those and have those. And Rachel, hearing you say that, you know, you've had so many great times with Libby, I think that's a great, you know, problem to have almost, not being able to pick one great experience with your child. So thank you so much for sharing that. I only have one more question prepared, but again, I want to remind our attendees that you can feel free to ask anything in the Q&A or the chat. Also, Frederick, if you have anything that you want to say or contribute, I'd be happy to hear that. So I'm going to give it a few seconds, see if people, you know, submit anything, and then if not, we'll move to the last question and then end a few minutes early.
Hi again. So I have just been like sitting here like rapt listening to y'all talk about your beautiful children. And I guess like my biggest question is what, like, for people, children, adults, youth, any age, like, what advice do you have for them about starting these conversations with their parents? Like, how is there an ideal situation? Like you was saying, like at the dinner table, is that too out in the open? Is it like a car ride? Is it, you know, pull you aside into my bedroom and, you know, show you this book that I've been thinking about reading? And does that vary based on age, on like what's the best way for the trans and gender non-conforming and non-binary individuals who are watching this to talk to their parents?
So let me jump in with how Jeremy did it with us, because he was super effective. He made a video. So he sat at his computer, and with just whatever the software was on his computer, he hit record. And that way he could pick his words carefully. He could go back and redo it. He could practice it. And then, so the first video he shared with us was telling us he was going to have top surgery. And what he said when he shared it with us was, please watch it all the way through without asking questions. And so it gave him a chance to really control the flow of information. And it was, I think we would have listened in any case. He didn't have to have done that I like to think, given who we are, that we would have given him that space if he said, I need to tell you something and I need you to not say anything for a little bit and let me just talk. But it worked. And it's something that I would recommend if we've got any teenagers listening or younger that are trying to figure out how to approach their parents, it was a really effective tool.
That's brilliant, Jo. I love that. I don't have great advice. I think there's just so many variables, and I think, if you're feeling like it might not go well, it's really important to have a safe person that you can contact immediately, or you can go to if you need to. I really struggle with that question because I've been asked so many times, and there's just so many variables. I would love to think that most parents would be all over it. It takes a minute, but settle in. But I love the video idea because, makes parents sit through it for a second before they ask any questions.
And I love your suggestion about having a safe person to go to, because no matter how understanding the trans child or teen is trying to be of their parents may react really badly. And I know too many young adults that have been kicked out of their homes. And that's a possibility, unfortunately. And there's this supportive group of moms and other parents and friends that we need to keep getting our names out there, that we are available to help. And just Out Youth is fantastic for that. I know you're there, and the GSAs and that networking. That's awesome. We have to keep doing that because there are going to be cases where either someone's kicked out or they're physically abused or challenged somehow when they come out to their parents, and we got to protect.
Yeah, we actually have a Q Plus EDU session next Tuesday, the 28th, on safety planning around being kicked out for LGBTQ plus youth, because we know that that's a reality that a lot of people in our community face. So I want to ask Beth, what was it like for you to come out to your family as non-binary? And then I would like to ask all of you, what has it been like? Because knowing y'all, I'm sure that you have. What has it been like to support other trans kids whose parents have not been supportive of them? Like, how have those conversations been when you've had your children's friends come to you and say, help me, nobody else understands?
Yeah, so for me, I was at the hospital actually because of some pregnancy complications. So I had been hospitalized for a couple of days. It wasn't like super emergent, but it was this kind of like, ooh, I'm 28 weeks pregnant, I'm in the hospital, my family knew about that. And we decided to share Omega's name with our families as a way to kind of like get their support and just ask them like, hey, please like rally around us and help us get through this scary hospital experience and get ready to bring this baby here whenever they come. So I just texted my parents and kind of took advantage of like what was already sort of a serious situation. And like, I knew they were already concerned about me, like they had already checked on me. It felt like that was kind of maybe my best shot because it was something that I knew was not gonna feel great for them. I knew that there might be issues. So it was just kind of like, hey, I'm in the hospital. oh my goodness, is the baby's name. We're not going to assign a gender to them. Also, I'm non-binary. These are some words that I like about myself. So I think I want to affirm for folks that like, it's okay if it kind of comes out in a really intense way, because especially if you've kept that to yourself for a long time, I think it can feel like it's really just bubbled up to the surface. So it doesn't have to be perfect. And also other people's responses aren't on you. And every time I've had a coming out experience with my own parents or with my spouse's parents who we live with, those friends who can really kind of hype you up afterwards and affirm your gender and sort of support you through it are really, really important.
Well, I have had thanks for that, Beth. That's really cool. I have had the experience of college-age students telling me that they've been kicked out of their home. And the first time that happened, I was totally unprepared for it. I felt like Jeremy and I had gone to a campus to give a talk, and we had talked about how to address questions, and we both were saying, well, we're just sharing our own stories, so of course we can handle any questions because we know the answers, and as long as we're being consistent and true and all of that, it'll be easy. And then the first question was from a young trans man who said, I told my parents last week and they kicked me out. What do I do? And it was, Jeremy and I looked at each other like, shoot, we don't know what to do. We kind of jumped into advocacy totally untrained ourselves. And fortunately, we were able to think on our feet enough to connect this student with the counseling group at the school, which is actually the group that had brought us in. And so it was a pretty straightforward thing, but that made us much more aware of the need to find out what are the resources. And so to just know that, in each city in Texas, is there a resource center? Is there, who can someone call for help if we find out? And the need to do that, I think, is important. Out Youth has an incredible support document. It's like 50 or 60 pages long that has all of these resources for LGBTQ youth. And I don't know what kind of feedback you've gotten on that, Frederick, but it's an incredible document. And I have sent a link to it more times than I can keep track of. So my feeling is my role as an advocate is to be able to direct to the resources who are experienced and know what to do, that I don't have to know how to do everything. And I just have to be an understanding ear and reflect back to a young person what they've said to me, and to just acknowledge that they are real and worthy of dignity and respect, and that there's this community of moms and parents and advocates that care about them. And that's kind of, I've lost track of the question a little bit, E, but that's kind of how, or I guess, Frederick, that was your question. That's how I have had to deal with it, and that's how I've approached it.
I should have introduced myself saying that I have 3 biological children, because I'm mom to a lot of people, some people older than me, and I am happy to do so. But it's also heartbreaking that so many parents are missing out on their really cool ass kids. I've actually been, Debbie Jackson is a very public mom of a trans kid who's my best friend, and she and I have had several conversations wanting to get training from the Trevor Project, because both of us have had so many incidences where we've had trans adults come to us with suicidal ideations, and we're not well prepared for that. And so, we do the best that we can, but really just keeping an open door policy to everyone in our chosen family and anyone that needs us. We did have a discussion a few years ago, and as long as our kids are young, we've decided we won't have anyone else move in with us, but we we try our hardest to have a safe haven for people when they need it. It's a tough world out there sometimes. And I'm not even sure if I answered your question properly.
Yeah, you definitely did. And I am excited to know that I think New Orleans is opening the first like exclusively, I don't know if it's exclusively trans or if it's exclusively LGBTQ, but New Orleans is opening a shelter soon, which is great news considering what the federal government is doing regarding trans folks and homeless shelters. My background, I don't know if any of y'all know my background, but I worked in domestic violence and crisis intervention for 7 years. And part of that training was some like basic suicide prevention or suicide crisis intervention training. And the model that was effective in the context in which we were doing it was to ask the person to share their story with you. So, tell me what's making you feel so bad. Once you give them space to tell their story, ask them if they have a plan to kill themselves. And it's important, if you're talking about suicide, to use really clear language. There's no reason to sugarcoat anything. You're not planting the idea in anybody's head. Most people who have experienced suicidal ideation express that they feel relief when someone asks them about suicide. And so you're helping them lift that burden if you're willing to talk about it with them. And so asking them, what's making you feel so bad, let them tell you those things, and then validate, offer, your sympathy that how they're feeling is totally valid. And then ask them if they have a plan. If they have a plan, then if you can talk about, if they don't have a plan, then they're actually pretty low risk. And then you can talk about resources and other things like that. If they have a plan, you can talk about the safety planning portion of it, which is removing the means. And so whether that's, can you have a friend take, that prescription for the night? Can you, put the gun in the safe and change the combination to the safe? Can you have your friend take your car keys? Whatever the means is that they're planning to use, if we can just put some distance between them and the ability to use it. And then just resources. But honestly, for so many suicidal folks, just being able to tell their story and have that space held for them is really important. And so obviously that's something that you're really good at, Rachel. So I'm sure that you've handled it really well. And there are tons of resources available, like the Trevor Project. There's also, the Suicide Lifeline specifically has folks that are trained to help the LGBTQ community. And then there are other resources that are just for talking as well. So the LGBTQ helpline, they also have a youth talk line. There's the SAGE talk line for LGBT elders. And then as far as domestic violence resources go for the LGBTQ community, the Northwest Network, which is based out of Seattle, and the Network Leaded, which is based out of Boston, are both excellent resources. And we'll be talking a lot more about these things on Tuesday's session, but I wanted to throw those out there since it came up. I want to pass it over to you because it looks like we do have a couple of questions that came in from the audience.
Yes, so we have one question in the Q&A. And they said, I am a single parent of an NB 15-year-old. I'm curious about your thoughts regarding letting the kid take the lead regarding coming out on their own to others versus taking the lead and kind of taking that on for them and setting those boundaries like Rachel was discussing. So Rachel, if you want to start on that, if you have feedback.
Yeah, I wasn't really referring to boundaries that would relate to that. I am 100% about letting my kid take the lead on what they are comfortable doing, of all my kids really, but I do think it's important to, and E might be, is probably the best person to answer this, but creating a safe plan together has kind of been and my daughter is younger than your kids, so I know there's other variables at play, but I've always been a huge proponent of being proud of who you are, and it's not something that we're keeping a secret unless I'm not outing my kid, but it's also not a secret. So I don't want her to ever feel like it's something that she has to hide. So we will talk through plans. Like, she knows that if someone doesn't know that she's trans and she's thinking about telling them, we'll just talk through, like, role play kind of what could happen, the different potentials on the table. We recently had, she changed schools last school year, and we had I have someone knocking on the door. Sorry, we'll just ignore that. And she had a new friend. I'm still on the call. Sorry. Good for the recording. It's definitely my 5-year-old. So we had a situation where she was like, yeah, I'm not really sure if he knows I'm trans, and she wanted to go to his house, and so then she did go to his house. It was fine. I talked to his parents, and I had the green light from her to talk to his parents, and they were like, oh yeah, no, Libby like Googled her name and showed us videos of herself, and we're totally supportive, and it's great, and we love having her around. And I was so holding my breath how that was going to go. Sorry for the fun distraction going on. Just escalating. Henry, I'm on a call. They're waiting for a birthday parade. So anyway, all of that to say, I would totally take your kids' lead and let them do what they are most comfortable doing. I definitely think safety is a priority, and it's really important to talk out what that can look like. But I'm just going to go ahead and mute myself.
And I would agree with what Rachel said, that it's absolutely 15 years old is plenty old enough and aware enough to be taking the lead and telling the parent what to do, as opposed to the parent having to provide any direction. Now, support's another story. That a 15-year-old still needs a huge amount of support. So does a 63-year-old. So we always want to give that support, but I'd follow the lead for a 10-year-old. I'd follow the lead for a 6-year-old. I think kids know what they need from us.
Yeah, totally. I think following the lead is important, and kind of examining within yourself too. And I try to do this for myself, and also being married to somebody who is also trans, but always being willing to have the conversations if they want you to. So it might be easier to say, okay, well, let your child take the lead, but knowing I'm doing that work within yourself to be ready for when them taking the lead is like, hey, could you step up and have this difficult conversation for me or with me? Or, hey, could you really like help me come out in this difficult way or this scary way? Always being willing to go to bat for people, but also, as Rachel said, not outing them or pressuring them to come out if that doesn't feel good.
Yeah, you make a great point, Beth. I think one of the things that what you said made me think about is how much trans and especially non-binary kids need support in schools to get administrations to be supportive of their chosen name, of their correct pronouns, of which extracurricular team or group they're going to be in. And so yeah, absolutely, like if your child is running into trouble at school, they need you to advocate for them, because parents have the strongest voices in schools. You can absolutely be a thorn in that administrator's side, and they will eventually change their policies if enough parents are angry enough about it. But of course, like, follow your child's lead. But if they're telling you, I really, I want to, be in the band, but I don't want to have to wear this uniform because of the way the school thinks about my gender, this is important to me, can you help me with this? Like, that's when they need you to step up and be the angry mama, papa bear, or whatever, non-binary parent bear, and step up and use your parental powers to help protect them and get them what they need.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing. I think that we're going to go ahead and, start wrapping up. So the last question I have for all three of you is, do you have any final pieces of advice or wisdom you'd like to share with our audience? So that can be anything that we didn't cover during this session. It can also be things that we did cover that you just really want to, drive home. So yeah, Beth, if you want to start on that one.
To me, what feels like a good thing to close with is just remembering that it always changes. And I think that can be really comforting, both for kids and parents. So if you're a kid of any age, who is coming out to your parents and that feels so painful, or something dangerous happens, or it's really tough, that relationship isn't going to change in a predictable way, but as time goes on, things do change. And so these singular moments can feel so final, or when your child comes out to you, it can feel like, wow, I wasn't expecting this. I don't know what to do. But we don't live in those moments forever. And so it's always open for all of us to really explore this together and use it as a chance to get closer, and kind of all become more ourselves, rather than just being stuck in these scary moments or the difficult moments.
I love that, Beth. I think just to piggyback a little bit off of what Beth said, I think I'm skipping turns. Sorry, Jo. I think I just want to say, for any parents that are new to this, that sometimes it can feel really scary when everything you've known to be true about yourself and society is kind of flipped on its head. But I'm here to tell you that it's so much better once you start unpacking all of those things, and you'll just be in such a better place when you can embrace it. And you might not understand everything, and that is fine. But reach out to people around you, and I think you can contact the folks on here, and they can get you in contact with me if you need to hash out some of the stuff going on. If you're in Texas, there's also the TX Trans Kids that you can go on there and fill out a form for assistance if you need. It's a coalition with the ACLU and Lambda Legal if you need legal help, and I definitely refer lots of people over to Out Youth too. So I think that's what I got. I'll pass it to you, Jo. Sorry for taking your turn.
That's fine. Thanks. I would say three things come to mind. First is that your kid is still the same kid after they've come out to you. So whatever they liked doing before, they're going to still like doing. Whatever they didn't like before, they won't like doing. It's still your kid. And so the love that you've felt for your kid up until the moment that they tell you they're transitioning, or that they are trans, or however they tell you, whatever they tell you, you still love your kid. So that's number one. Number two is just a reminder of the power of stories. And we've talked about resources and the importance of some books. I will take advantage of this moment to flag that I hope parents will find it helpful to read a book that I had written, Once a Girl, Always a Boy. That's Jeremy's story. And that just came out this last spring. And parents are telling me it's really helping them. Grandparents are telling me. So that's, hopefully you'll find that helpful. And the third and last and the most important thing is to be very aware how joyful this journey can be. The experience I've had with Jeremy is something I would not give up for anything in the world. I have had the opportunity to watch him flourish and grow into the person he wants to be, and that's been amazing. And what we all want as parents is for our kids to be happy. And if our kids happen to be transgender, then being able to express that is what's going to make them happy. And being a part of that is just the most joyful thing that a parent can do. And so, yes, there's hard moments. Yes, there is pain. Yes, our society is not accepting yet, and we need to make progress. But enjoy the moments with your trans kids. This is a phenomenal experience that you're having a chance to deal with right now, and welcome to it.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for sharing those pieces of advice and for sharing everything you've talked about in the last hour and a half. I think this has been a really amazing and informative and moving discussion, and I hope that all of our attendees enjoyed it and learned things from it. But with that, we are going to go ahead and wrap up. This is being recorded, so the recording will be up on the Q Plus EDU website sometime in the near-ish future. So check back, frequently for updates. And our next session is going to be this Friday at 4 p.m. It is a sex ed Q&A with two folks from Unhushed, which is an organization that provides comprehensive sex ed for all students. And so it's a really great opportunity to ask any questions that you have about sex and sexual health, especially if those questions weren't able to be answered in any sex ed class you had in schools. So we definitely encourage you to show up for that, and the link is in the chat. And we also encourage you to give us feedback on this session or any of the other Q Plus EDU sessions that you've attended. And so here's the link to our feedback form. Also, please feel free to use the form if you want to get in touch with any of our panelists. Just, let us know who you want to talk to, and we will introduce you and make that happen in any way you can. And the last thing that I'm going to plug is our link to donate to this project. And so we've been working really hard on this to provide all of this content to everyone free of charge. But one thing that we're really committed to is making sure that we offer payment to all of our speakers, because it's part of our commitment to equity and access. We want to make sure that everyone is able to be compensated for the time and labor that they put in this project. So if you would like to contribute to that and contribute to our ability to continue paying our speakers, the link to donate is in the chat. But with that, I think that is all I have to say. So thank you all so much for coming, and I hope to see you at our future sessions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
My fellow panelists, you guys are awesome. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Great.